What if right now, behind closed doors, the most dangerous war of our time is already being negotiated? What if the explosions you see, the missiles, the chaos, the breaking news alerts are only the surface of something much deeper, something far more calculated? Because today, Donald Trump made a statement that shocked the entire world. He said that negotiations with Iran are happening right now. But just moments later, Iran responded with a completely opposite claim. They said there are no negotiations at all. So now the world is left with one simple but powerful question. Who is telling the truth? And more importantly, is this war about to end, or are we moving towards something even bigger? Right now, tension between Iran, Israel, and the United States has reached a level we haven't seen in years. This is not just another conflict. This is a situation that has the potential to reshape global power, affect economies worldwide, and change the lives of millions of people. The roots of this conflict go deep. For years, Iran and Israel have been in a shadow war. Cyber attacks, proxy groups, intelligence operations. The United States has also been heavily involved supporting Israel and trying to limit Iran's influence in the region. But what we are seeing now is no longer a shadow war. It is open, direct, and dangerous. Strikes have been carried out on key targets. Military bases have been hit. Strategic locations have been attacked. Each move is calculated, but every move also increases the risk of escalation. And then came the response. Iran did not stay silent. It reacted with force. Missiles and drones were launched toward Israeli positions and U.S. bases in the region. The message was clear. Iran is willing to fight back. This is where things started to become truly global, because this conflict is not isolated. It affects shipping routes, oil supply, and international trade. One of the most critical areas in this entire situation is the Strait of Hormuz, a narrow passage through which a large portion of the world's oil travels. Even a small disruption in this area can send shockwaves across the global economy. Fuel prices rise, transportation costs increase, food becomes more expensive, and suddenly a war happening far away starts affecting everyday life in countries across the world. Now, in the middle of all this tension, Donald Trump stepped forward with a bold claim. He said that the United States is already talking to Iran, that negotiations are actively happening, and that Iran wants a deal. This statement created immediate reactions. For some, it sounded like hope. Maybe the situation is under control. Maybe diplomacy is working behind the scenes. Maybe the war could end sooner than expected. But then Iran responded, and their response was direct and clear. They rejected the claim entirely. They said there are no negotiations, no talks, no agreements being discussed. This contradiction is where the confusion begins, because in international politics, especially during war, information is not always simple. Statements are often strategic, words are chosen carefully. Sometimes what is said publicly is very different from what is happening privately. So when one side says negotiations are happening and the other side says they are not, it raises several possibilities. One possibility is that talks are actually happening, but secretly. This is very common in global conflicts. Countries often use mediators, other nations or organizations, to communicate indirectly. These discussions are kept hidden to avoid political pressure or public backlash. Another possibility is that the statement is part of a strategy. Saying that negotiations are happening can calm markets, reduce panic, and show strength to the public. It creates an image of control, even if the situation is still unstable. There is also the possibility of psychological warfare. In modern conflicts, controlling the narrative is just as important as controlling territory. If one side can create confusion or uncertainty, it gains an advantage. And finally, it could be about internal messaging, trying to show progress, leadership, and direction to citizens and allies. But while all of this is being said and debated, the reality on the ground tells a different story. The conflict is still active, strikes continue, military movements are increasing, defense systems are on high alert. Countries in the region are preparing for multiple scenarios, including the possibility of a wider war. If negotiations were truly close to success, we would expect to see signs of de-escalation. But instead, what we are seeing is continued tension. This raises another important question. What is the real objective here? For the United States and its allies, the goals are often described as preventing Iran from developing nuclear weapons, reducing its military capabilities, and protecting allied nations in the region. But achieving these goals is not simple. Iran is a large, complex country with significant resources and strategic depth. Even after heavy strikes, it still has the ability to respond. It still has influence in the region, and it still has options. Some analysts believe that the situation is not just about defense or immediate threats. They argue that this is also about long-term power and influence in the Middle East. Control of key regions, alliances, and resources has always been important in global politics, and this conflict fits into that larger picture. There is also a more controversial question being asked. Is this about changing Iran's leadership? Because some actions and statements suggest that possibility. Targeting leadership structures, encouraging internal pressure, and weakening institutions can all point toward a strategy that goes beyond simple military objectives. If that is the case, then negotiations become even more complicated. It is difficult to negotiate with a system that one side may want to replace. And this is why the situation remains so uncertain. For people watching from outside the region, it might feel distant, but the effects are already being felt globally. Energy markets are reacting, trade routes are being monitored, governments are adjusting their policies, businesses are preparing for disruptions. In today's interconnected world, a conflict in one region can quickly impact the entire globe. And that brings us back to the present moment, a moment where one of the most powerful voices in global politics says negotiations are happening, and the other side says they are not. So what happens next? There are two main paths. In one scenario, negotiations, whether public or secret, begin to make progress. Tensions slowly decrease, military actions reduce, agreements are discussed, and eventually the situation stabilizes. In the other scenario, the gap between statements and reality continues to grow. Trust decreases, actions escalate, more countries become involved, and the conflict expands. Right now, both possibilities are still open, and that is what makes this moment so critical. Because decisions being made right now, both publicly and privately, will shape what happens next. Will diplomacy win, or will escalation take over? At this stage, no one can say for certain, but one thing is clear. This is not just a regional conflict anymore. This is a global moment, a moment where information, strategy, and power are all colliding at the same time. And somewhere behind the scenes, conversations may or may not be happening that could determine the future. So the question remains, do you believe negotiations are really happening right now? Or is this just part of a larger strategy? Because in today's world, understanding what is real and what is being presented as real has never been more important. And as the situation continues to unfold, the world is watching.